Thank you. And you are all familiar faces, and that's nice, especially so early in the morning. Yes, taking charge of credit. And some of this stuff we're going to zip through so fast because there's so much to talk about. But do stop me if you have questions. We want to just quickly hit, what is credit? Credit is a loan. Sometimes people feel like it's extra money. Credit is not extra money, and that's the critical thing. You make a promise that you'll be paying back this on particular kinds of terms. And it comes with fees, interest, and other charges, obviously. It comes in different forms. And sometimes we think of credit and we only think of credit cards, or we only think of loans like installment loans such as a mortgage or a car loan or a student loan. But there's this third kind, which you all in your field probably are more aware of than the average citizen, short-term service credit, where you're provided a service, for example, by a doctor's office or a hospital or a car repair place, and they trust that you're going to pay it. Cell phone service, sometimes if you pay by use, then they're trusting that you're going to pay it afterwards. So that's service credit. All three of those are types of credit. Revolving credit is the one that's most easy to get out of control, because with installment credit, you actually sign the papers and you know exactly how much the loan is. It's a car loan, it's for X $1,000, and you're going to pay so many $100 a month for so many months, and then it's done. It's very clear. With revolving credit, you can keep adding. It's a credit card. You just keep adding, and you might never actually sit down and realize how much you've borrowed, because it's not just one transaction. So we want to talk a little bit about credit card basics, just to make sure you're aware of the costs involved. Interest rate is the obvious cost, and the cost that most people are most aware of. Typically these days, interest rates are between, in the upper teens, percent-wise, but you can have cards that are lower than that, better interest rates. Sometimes there's an annual fee just to have the card, and you need to be aware of that. Ideally, if you have good credit, if a good credit history, you should be able to avoid cards with an annual fee. At least try to, because that's money you're going to have to pay no matter what. With interest, if you pay your bill in full every month, you'll never pay interest. I don't even know what the interest rates are on my credit cards because I never pay interest. And so it doesn't really matter to me. And that doesn't mean I shouldn't be aware, and I know where to find what the interest rate is. But the annual fee is something that you're going to be stuck with no matter how wisely you use your credit card. And then there are all these other fees. These fees have had some additional regulation. If we have time, which we might not, I can talk a little bit about some of the changes from the Card Act that improved our situation with regard to these other fees. But over-limit fees, late payment fees, and various kinds of transaction fees, cash advance fees, there's all sorts of different fees. And ideally, to be smart using our credit cards, we avoid those fees by managing our accounts well. Now, I want you to talk with whoever you're sitting by, and just for like 3 minutes or something, and identify the advantages. All those fees, so why do people, if there's all these fees, then why do people use credit cards especially? And what are the disadvantages? Besides the fees, which is the obvious disadvantage, what are the other disadvantages? So just talk with your neighbor and come up with the benefits and disadvantages of credit. So what'd you come up with? What are some of the advantages or benefits from using credit?
You can get, building your credit up, you can get like a house.
These days, hardly anyone would ever own a house if credit wasn't available, because there are certain major purchases, housing being the most obvious, that none of us would ever have enough cash accumulated for until we were like 70. And we really could use the house when we're raising our kids, right? At younger ages. So yes, that's a big advantage of credit. What else? Mm-hmm.
So rewards programs?
There are rewards to credit card programs. You can get bonus or cash back or frequent flyer miles or various kinds of rewards. Yes. What else?
Convenience and not having to pay.
Convenience, absolutely.
Safety probably.
Safety, you're not carrying as much cash. True. Any other thoughts? Those are great thoughts. You hit most of the list. Another one is the emergency thing. Having credit, I always tell this story, and maybe I told it already to you guys actually, but two people who live side by side, person A in the neighborhood, they have the same income. Neither one of them has any money in savings. The only real financial difference between them is that this one has great credit, always pays their bills on time, doesn't have much debt at all. This person has a ton of debt and a pretty poor history of paying their bills on time. Suppose on the same cold January night, they both have their furnace explode. Neither one of them has any money in savings to buy a new furnace, but they live in Iowa, they need a furnace. Who's gonna have an easier time getting, this one's gonna have an easier time getting their furnace because they have low debt and a good credit history. And that's the kind of emergency that credit can be really useful for. I like to hope that this person would get credit, would get a furnace because people in Iowa are nice, but they're probably gonna have a lot more hassle, a lot more stress. It's gonna cost them more to borrow money to put that furnace in. They might need a co-signer and then someone else is taking a risk on them paying that back. So the emergency thing is something not to forget, including traveling emergencies, because sometimes when you have an emergency, you're in a place where nobody knows you. But if you have a credit card, then they will trust that you're gonna pay that credit card company and that they're not taking a risk by giving you service. Convenience, you mentioned. Large purchases, you mentioned. There are some places where you can't pay with cash. Not so often, but there are those situations. A lot of times to hold a reservation or a rental car, or to make certainly online transactions or catalog transactions, you need to use credit. And by comparison with debit cards, credit cards don't create a hold on your checking account, which I think we talked about last time. So what are the disadvantages besides the fees? What'd you come up with?
Convenience again.
Haha, why is that a disadvantage?
Because you would be more apt to use it maybe when you shouldn't.
Yes, because you can easily overspend. And there's clear research that shows that to be true. Other disadvantages?
Don't manage it well, as that picture shows.
Yeah, it's a great picture, isn't it? Yeah, if you don't manage it well, you create this really terrible reputation that follows you long into the future and affects more than just your ability to borrow money, too. Interest, fees, tempting to overspend, the possibility that a card might be lost or stolen, you know, that there is that risk. Identity theft might be easier if you're using credit cards. And here's the big one here, the risk that you could get into serious debt. So very good. I knew you guys would come up with most of those advantages and disadvantages. The costs of using debt, I've got a couple examples. This is a car loan and it's figured at 8%. Someone with good credit nowadays can get a car loan lower than 8%. But this one, someone with poor credit might have to pay 8% or even more for a car loan. Suppose they were borrowing $10,000 for this car, paying for it over 5 years, $205 a month. They're going to pay a total of a little over $2,000 in interest. So that car that was costing them $10,000 or maybe $12,000 if they put some down payment down is now costing an extra $2,000 because of the interest. Even more dramatic is the amount of interest on a mortgage. Because it's a big loan over a long period of time. Again, this is quoted at a 6.5% mortgage. This example was made a few years ago, and we have much lower mortgage rates now, although it's possible that some people might still have to pay higher mortgage rates. But suppose someone borrowed $80,000 over 25 years. Their monthly payment would be $540 for principal and interest, plus taxes and insurance. So depending where they lived, it could be $650, it could be more. That's their mortgage payment. Over the course of that loan, if they keep the house until it's paid off and never incur any fees, the total interest is going to be $82,000. That's a remarkable number. The actual interest is more than the original amount of the loan. That's because it's for such a long time. And we need to be aware of that. Now, with a 4% interest rate, it might not be more than the amount of the loan, but it's still substantial. I think it's really interesting, and I can tell a story on myself. When we bought our first house, we quibbled a bit, on the selling price. It was listed for, she had it listed here, we offered here. She came down, we went up. She came down, people quibble over right down to the last $500 on the selling price of the house. But maybe don't shop around at all for the interest rate. We didn't. Maybe we did. I don't actually remember, it was a long time ago, but I don't have any clear remembrance of shopping around for the best interest rate on that mortgage. And even 0.1% interest can make a substantial difference over a long loan like that. So since then, I have done better when I've bought or refinanced houses in terms of shopping around. But that is a very common thing that people do. They quibble on the selling price without recognizing that they really need to be looking at the interest rate and perhaps associated fees also with the mortgage. So that's an example, two examples of how debt can cost you. In general, the interest cost of debt is affected by three things, and we've kind of alluded to them. How much you borrow, what the interest rate is, and how long you borrow it for. And that last piece is pretty critical. If we have a credit card with 17% interest rate and a $3,000 balance, if we pay that off at $250 a month, say it was an emergency, say it was that furnace, and we pay it off at $250 a month, we'll pay $311 in interest, and it'll be paid off in just over a year. If we only pay $100 a month, it'll cost $934 interest. That makes the furnace $4,000, and it's going to take 3.5 years about. If we pay $60 a month, the interest is going to be over $2,000, well over $2,000, and it's going to take more than 7 years. And if we pay minimum payments, which in this case, the minimum payment is 3% of the balance. So the first minimum payment would be $90, which is more than this, but the minimum payment goes down as your balance goes down. It's going to be more interest and more than 15 years. Minimum payments are disastrous. They're set up to cost us the most possible money. Those of you who have young adults in your life who are just starting to learn to use credit need to make sure they understand this, because a lot of times young adults can they think they're doing everything right. They get their bill, it says how much they borrowed, but it says that they owe $15 and it needs to be paid by the 10th of the month. And they do that and they think they're doing everything right. But they don't realize how much it's going to cost them if they stretch out the payments. So the cheapest way to use a credit card is to obviously pay in full every month. And if you do that, you'll never pay interest. But if you have a major thing, for example, the emergency furnace, and you do need to stretch it out, it's clear here how much difference it makes to pay even a little more than the minimum payment. If this person had started with the $90 initial minimum payment and kept paying $90 instead of having it go down, I should run an example to see what that would be. Because obviously they would be paid off in less than 7 years, because $60 a month got them paid off in about 7 years. So that's That's just a really important piece for people to understand. The costs of debt, obviously, we're kind of back to disadvantages. Obviously, there are dollar costs to debt, but there's also the whole insecurity piece with debt. Whenever you have borrowed money, that means you've got some of your income for the future committed, which means that in the future, if you need that income for something else, you don't have it. And that insecurity is a piece that people need to keep in mind. That doesn't mean we should never borrow money, but it means we need to be aware of the importance of the decisions we make when we're borrowing money, and we need to be really secure about having income to cover that and still be able to meet our future needs. There are people who say, well, the banker said I can afford this, I have enough. Well, that's great for now. But what happens if your income goes down in the future? What happens if you add a new medical expense in the future? What happens if you have a couple extra kids in the future? That idea of not borrowing to your maximum capacity, just because the lender said you can afford it doesn't mean it's a smart idea. We saw that with the housing crisis too. People who, and sometimes lenders really almost cheated, were illegal or unethical there. But also sometimes lenders who were doing everything by the book, but the people weren't thinking for themselves to say, wait a minute, what if something happened? And that creates some real issues. So we need to be aware of the insecurity disadvantage of using credit. And then the potential, when we face with problems with insecurity, the potential for family stress and instability, people having, losing housing, having to move a lot, those kinds of things. That's a result sometimes of excessive debt, poor debt management. So it's really worth it to manage debt well. Back to that credit record. How important is your credit record and why? Lori.
Well, when you get loans and based on your credit record, you'll get a lower interest rate if you're good at paying.
Okay, the lower interest rate. I mentioned that, right now, someone with good credit would not have to pay 8% for a car loan. Someone with bad credit might have to pay 8% or more. Other reasons why your credit record is important. Any other thoughts? Okay. There are several reasons, actually. It's like a resume. It's a reputation, and it matters for loans, but it also matters for certain jobs. It matters if you want to be able to rent a certain apartment. Certain landlords wouldn't rent to you if you had a poor credit score or a poor credit history. Some insurance premiums will be higher if you have a poor credit history. Or you might not be able to get insurance at all. Certain car insurance, home insurance, certain types of insurance that are not group-based insurance policies, the premiums or insurability can be at risk because of a poor credit risk history. And whatever is on your credit record stays on for 7 to 10 years. So it's not like it's just a mistake that, oh, well, by next year everyone will have forgotten. No, it'll still be there. The other side of that, though, is sometimes people say, oh, there's no hope for me. I have bad credit in my history. Everything's going to be terrible for at least the next 7 to 10 years. Well, that's not necessarily true either. Information on your credit report that's older, is less important than the most recent information on your credit report. And I've heard clearly from bankers that if someone has a history of some problems, but they get their act together and they have 1 or 2 years of paying everything on time and doing a great job, that hugely improves their ability to get, say, a mortgage or a car loan. So it's going to stay on your record for 7 to 10 years. But even 1 or 2 years of doing a really good job does really improve things. So it's not like you can't dig yourself out of a hole if you've gotten into a hole. How to get your credit report, the one handout, the ivory colored one, gives you that information. The law changed quite a few years ago now to explain, or to give us all a right to get our free credit report once a year. And this information that's on the screen is right here. You can get it by mail. I don't recommend that. It's very slow, and you have to fill out their particular form. You can get it by phone. It's a little bit slow, because it has to come to you in the mail. The online credit report is very secure. So for most people, that's a great way to get their credit report. But if they prefer, they can do it one of the other ways. The key thing is to make sure you're using this website or this phone number. To not use one of the other services that's out there. You'll see ads that offer you free credit reports, and websites that sound like it's a good deal. There's two potential risks with those other places that might be offering you free credit reports. One of the risks is that it actually could be an identity theft scam. Okay, you don't necessarily know that, and it's probably not, but it could be. They could actually be wanting you to put in all your information, and then they've got all your information. More likely, it's something that's trying to get you to sign up for something that you'll pay for. Some of the free credit report services are trying to get you to sign up for a credit monitoring service, and they'll give you a free credit report right away, but then they'll start charging you $15 a month or $30 a month to keep an eye on your credit report on an ongoing basis. So that's why this is the one you want to make sure you are using to get your annual free credit report. There are 3 credit bureaus, so if you want, you can get all 3 at once. Or if you're real organized and want to stagger them, you could get one now. What's now? Now is April. Get one now, one in August, another one in December, and sort of have them staggered throughout the year. Personally, that's not my strategy because I'm not gonna remember to do that. But some of you might be willing to mark your calendars and make sure you do that. We know that lots of Americans aren't taking advantage of this. People fought for this right to have a free credit report, and we aren't all taking advantage of it. I am even over a year. I haven't checked mine in the last year. And we really do need to do that. Why? Why do we need to check our credit report? Yeah. The main reason is to make sure there are no mistakes or fraudulent accounts or transactions on your credit report. So the reason they could pass that law to give us this free credit report was because of the rising occurrence of identity theft. So that's why it's important. Yes?
Somebody once told me that whenever you have too many credit reports run on your account,
Good question.
it affects your credit rating.
Mhm.
Is that?
There's some truth to that, and you can understand the logic for it. It'll affect your credit score, and we're going to talk about credit scores in a minute. But if you're always applying for loans, that kind of looks like you're pretty desperate to borrow money, right? And so every time you apply for a loan, they're going to check your credit report. So if you're always applying for new credit cards, if you're always applying for different loans, then it makes sense that would make your credit score go down. Okay, so it's logical that would be true. But when you check your credit report, that does not, a different kind of inquiry. So they register it differently. So you don't have to worry about that. And if you, I'm going to buy a car probably later this summer, and I will shop around for credit. But if I make multiple inquiries about a particular kind of loan in a short period of time, like 2 weeks, then that will basically show up in my credit score as one inquiry, not a whole bunch. So if you're going to be shopping around for something, don't spread it out over months. Like, I'm not going to start now shopping around for my car loan, probably wait till August because I think that's when I might buy a car. So if you have a cluster of similar inquiries in a short period of time, that will only affect your credit score like one inquiry. Good question, though. I have, how many of you have seen your credit report? Excellent. I do have some sample, and if we had an hour and a half, I would definitely pass these out and we could look at what's on a credit report. If some of you have never seen a credit report or want to take a look at the samples afterwards, you can come up and we can talk about them if you want to. The top part of your credit report will be information about you, including your birth date and you know, your name and your maiden name perhaps, and where you live, and past addresses within the last 5 or more years, not every address you've ever lived at. It'll include a lot of information about all the different accounts you've had within the last 7 to 10 years. It'll have a list of inquiries, which is what Lori just got to, and it'll also have certain public record information. And generally that's going to be detrimental information, things like if you filed bankruptcy. And if you file bankruptcy, that stays on your report for 10 years, not 7. Everything else generally drops off after 7 years. Also, small courts claims or judgments against you. If there's a lien on your property that you own, then that would be there. I'm not sure if pending lawsuits show up on your credit report. I don't think so, because they're still pending. But a lawsuit judgment, you know, a court judgment against you, even if it wasn't small claims, which was my first example. So all of that stuff shows up on your credit report. Then we come to scores. I've had people come back to me after I've given them this handout and said, be sure and go check your credit report. Then they come back and they say, but they wanted to charge me for it. And it's, I understand how they got that impression. You will always, at this site, you will always get your credit report for free, but they will also offer you a chance to purchase your credit score if you want to. But you don't have to. You can still just get your free credit report. We currently don't have a legal right to see our credit score once a year for free. There's some talk of advocates pushing for that. But as of now, we don't have that. Our credit score is less critical. It has very little to do with identity theft, you know, which was the rationale for the earlier law. I compare it to, you know, when you were in school and the teacher had the grade book, and in the grade book was all your different things that you'd done during the semester. You had this paper and you had this test and this quiz and these worksheets and all this stuff. And that's what your credit history is. It's the list of everything. And then at the bottom of the grade book, the teacher gives you a grade, an A or a B or an A minus or a C plus or whatever. The credit score is like your grade. That's really what the lenders are going to look at. But there's no one credit score either. So making sure that what's on your credit report is accurate, and accurate is the critical thing to help give you the best possible credit score, the best score you can get. So there's different scoring methods. The traditional time-honored one, the first people who figured out that credit scoring could be a good idea, is an organization that used to be called Fair Isaac and Company, and now it's just called FICO. The thing that happened, you know, several decades ago, I think it was around in the 50s or maybe early 60s, it used to be that you would go to a banker and they would know you. They would know if they could trust you. They would know how much you owed or owned, and they would make their decision based on personal information that they had direct access to. Well, as we got to being a bigger society, more people borrowing money, more people moving around, not living in the same place all the time, they needed something a little more automated. And that was the bright idea that the Fair Isaac and Company people had that says, hey, people need help. This is a service we can provide. And that's the basis for why credit scores are used so much. Obviously, a higher score is better. With FICO scores, the maximum score is right around 850, and the lowest is 300. There's a Vantage score. There are other credit scoring mechanisms as well. If you ever do check your credit score, it will tell you the range for that particular kind of score. And it will also tell you There is to check your credit score when you are getting your free credit report, it costs about $9. And that would, for each credit report, I mean, there'd be a different score from each credit bureau. So it could be $27. And I definitely do not recommend that people spend $27 a year just to check their credit scores. But there can be benefit in checking it, especially, like I could check mine now. It might not be a bad idea because I'm looking at taking out a car loan in August. If I check it now, and if they'll tell me what it is, and they'll say, these are the top 2 or 3 things that are hurting your credit score. And then I might, even in 3 or 4 months, be able to make some small changes that would raise my credit score. It won't raise me from a really low score to a really high score, but even 10 points or something could make a difference. Every time I've seen my credit score, it's been really positive, and I haven't had to worry about that, but still, it could be worth an investment of $9 to just check that out and make sure that I'm where I want to be, because I know I'm taking out a loan in the near future. And that's one of the times that it can be smart to check a credit score. Also, people, maybe someone who's filed bankruptcy or has some trouble in their past credit, they just feel good about it. It's helpful to them to check their credit score maybe as often as once a year to see that it's going up, to see that, yes, the stuff I'm doing now that I'm doing right is erasing the bad history from the past. So if someone wants to invest $9, every year or two to see that their credit score is moving in the direction that they expect it to move, then that's I can understand someone making that choice. To build your credit history, for people who don't have credit history, and this may not apply to most of you, at least in the room, but if you don't have any history, these are some ways in which you can start building a credit history. Apply for a small loan. Even a small loan, if it's unsecured, can be hard. Unsecured means that that the bank doesn't have a right to take something away from you if you don't pay. My car loan would be secured by my car. My mortgage is secured by my house. So if I didn't make my house payments, they would come and take my house away from me. But credit cards, personal loans are unsecured. So starting small is a good idea. Getting credit with a local store or a small chain store, they're always looking for new customers. So that's one of the opportunities that you might have. Even your regular bills, service credit, cell phone, utility bills, those kinds of things. Paying those bills on time does help. And I will just mention, and I see this directly, but I would mention it anyway. People who are between 18 and 25, they're the potential new market for credit cards, and credit card companies are always looking for new customers. So they get a ton of marketing. I pushed my older daughter really hard to make sure she did get a credit card when that time came. She didn't want one. She was scared. I said, this is your time to get a credit card. Sometime in the future, you might not be able to get one if you don't get one now and prove that you can use it reliably. So I pushed her to get it, and then I had to push her to use it. My younger daughter was different. I didn't have to push her to do that or to use it. But if you or someone you know is at that age where they have this opportunity now, it's generally advisable to take advantage of the opportunity. Get credit, but recognize the magnitude of the way you use that opportunity. The implications are substantial for your future. So supervision is a helpful thing to young adults who are just starting to use credit. And the CARD Act, the law that was passed a few years ago, one of the things it does, it builds in some protections for young adults. And one of the protections it builds in, the main one, is that anyone 18 can still get a credit card, but they have to have a cosigner. And they can't get a credit card all by themselves until they're 21. Unless at 18 they can show that they are independent, financially independent, and they have income enough that they pay all their own bills. So for some 18-year-olds it works, but for most 18-year-olds it doesn't. So I had to co-sign for my younger daughters. But she's done well, and she turns 21 in August, and then I'm getting my name off. And she has done very well, and I made sure I had access to those bills. I was going to be seeing what's on those bills. To earn a good score, keeping credit cards or having long-standing accounts, that's really important. Sometimes people say, you know, I've got too many accounts. I don't need all these accounts, and that can be true. But don't close the longest ones. Keep the longest ones. Close the shorter ones. Close the ones that you just applied for to get a 20% discount at the department store. Having a long credit history is important. Pay your bills on time, obviously. Keep account balances below 50% of your available credit, or really even below 30% of your available credit is better. That's called your credit utilization rate. Suppose I have 5 credit cards, and each one of them has a $2,000 credit limit. That means I have a total of $10,000 available credit. If my total credit card debt, scattered among those different cards, is $6,500, then I have a 65% credit utilization rate, and that hurts my credit score. If I have, $2,000 of debt on those 5 cards, then I have a 20% credit utilization rate, and that's good for my credit score. If I say, I don't need all these cards, I'm going to close the other 4 and only use 1, and if I have $2,000 debt, then I'm down to 1 card with a $2,000 limit, and I've got a 100% credit utilization rate. So that's another piece you want to take into account when you're closing accounts, is don't close accounts to such an extent that you will mess up your credit utilization rate. Be careful about co-signing. When you co-sign for anybody on anything, you're at their mercy. And make sure you are well informed about how they're doing on that loan. And avoid excessive inquiries, which we talked about already. Okay, some examples. Give me thumbs up or thumbs down on each of these people. Bob, he never applied for a loan. He doesn't have a savings account. He has no credit history. He works and he saves his cash. He's going to have a poor credit. He's going to look like a risk, and he may be a risk. Ida has been making late payments on her car payments and stopped paying them altogether recently. She also has a tax lien on her house. Really bad. Sarah took out a car loan last year. She's been making the payments on time, has a good credit history. Obvious. Even if she'd made 1 or 2 payments late, she would still be pretty much thumbs up. A slightly late payment is not a disaster in your credit score. Oscar's 19 and working. He wants a credit card and promises to pay the bill on time, so his mother, Miranda, co-signs. Several months later, she finds out he's been late making payments. So let's talk about Oscar. Oscar's credit history is, his credit history is bad, because this is his only credit. How about Miranda? Miranda's is damaged by that. It depends on what else she's got. This might not be disaster for Miranda if she's had a tremendously wonderful history of paying debt in the past. But it's not good for Miranda either. Personally, I would rank, obviously Sarah is the best. She's number 1. But frankly, I would put Miranda number 2. And I'm not sure where I put Oscar. I would put Bob number 3 and Ida number 4. As far as who I would want to loan money to. I might put Oscar before Bob, because even though Oscar's been late, he's at least been making the payments. He's been late, but he's made them. So, and Bob, we have no way of knowing. How much credit can you afford? This is an important question for us all to consider. Is my debt where it should be, or am I putting myself at risk? For the first guideline, this is not talking, in both cases, they're not talking about your mortgage, okay? Because that would hurt people who have own a home instead of renting. So we're just not talking about mortgage housing. Apart from your mortgage, one guideline is to not be paying more than 15% of your take-home pay on credit. Another guideline would be no more than a third of what you have left after you've paid all your basic needs. So those are two pretty good guidelines. There is a way, this 15% one, there is a way you can cheat on that. And I'm going to tell you it so you don't do it, because this is a tool just for your use, so you don't want to cheat yourself. Suppose I have a $2,000 a month take-home pay. I have a $200 car payment and a $100 student loan payment every month, so that's $300. 300 over 2,000, that's 15%, right? So I'm safe, maybe on the line, but I'm safe. And mind you, I've seen these ratios figured where they were like 35, 40, really scary percents. However, if it wasn't a $100 student loan payment, if instead it was 5 credit card payments and all I was counting was $20 minimum payment, that's cheating. That's making it look like I have a lower percentage than I really do. In order to figure your credit card payments in that, you need to plan a payment that would be enough to get you out of debt within the year. So that's, just don't cheat yourself when you're using this to figure out what's my credit situation. Warning signs: living paycheck from paycheck, making late minimum or skipping payments, having credit cards at the credit limit or even near, arguing with family or friends, being unsure of how much you really owe. And that is more common than you would think, actually, because people have credit cards. And if they have multiple cards and if they carry balances from month to month, then they sometimes don't really ever look at the whole picture altogether. They look at each card and they say, okay, I see how much I owe here. Yep, okay. But they never add them all up. Using cash advances, that's a very scary and expensive sign. Having your credit card declined could happen for other reasons. Could happen because your company's protecting you and saying, wait a minute, using this card in Mexico? Well, if you were traveling in Mexico, you want to let them know that they might be protecting you, thinking that someone has stolen your card. But otherwise, if it's declined, it's a bad sign. And if the amount of money you're paying on debts is increasing from month to month, even that percentage, the 15% we talked about, suppose you calculated yours and it's at 18% or 15%. Okay. If you wait 6 months and calculate it again and it's down to 13%, then that's a good sign you're moving in the right direction. So part of it has to do with where you're at right now, and the other part of it has to do with what direction you're moving from month to month. And that's the other piece we want to consider.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
That 15% thing, is that when you're trying to pay off credit cards, or is that no matter what?
To figure that ratio as an assessment tool for your financial fitness, you would use, for credit cards, you would use a figure that would get me out of debt in the next year. So if I owe $2,000, I'd need to be factoring in 150, probably $180 or $190 a month payment. And building that into my credit ratio. And probably that would mean that I'd have it much higher than 15%. But the other one, no more than 1/3 of what's left. Also, if you're over that, that's risky. But if you're just putting all your money there and not spending money elsewhere because you are focused on getting out of debt, that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Because I have no credit card debt, but there are times when my credit bill is more than 15%.
Absolutely.
Because I bought a mattress.
Right. And I'm glad you asked that, because I'm the same way. Sometimes I don't usually meet those guidelines, but I pay my bills every month in full. So in a sense, those aren't really debts. So, okay, I'm glad you asked that. These are some things you might want to do. Okay, predatory lending. We're not going to have time to talk about this. I thought about hiding these slides and didn't, but payday loans, rent to own, if anyone wants to talk about them later, we can. But yeah, I'm sorry about that. I should have just hidden the slides. I kind of knew we wouldn't have time, but I wanted to leave them in just in case. To use credit wisely, the first two are really important. Think about the total cost of what you're buying. And when you're shopping around, it's the annual percentage rate you want to compare. If you go in and talk to a car salesman and the first question they ask you is, what monthly payment can you afford? That's a bad sign, because then they'll set you up with a loan that will be within that monthly payment, but it might be over who knows how long and cost you a fortune in the long run. It's not the monthly payment that should be your focus. It should be what's the annual percentage rate and what's going to be the total cost by the time I pay off, 7 years of monthly payments. And this becomes more and more important as car loans become longer and longer. Even when we had 5-year car loans, that was kind of startling. And now there are 6 and 7-year car loans. And that's really a concern. It's not necessarily the end of the world, but it is a risk. It's something you need to consider carefully. This one, we talked about not borrowing as much as you can afford just because you can afford it now. Because what if your income changes, or what if your other expenses changed? And always take a loan for the shortest time possible. Or if you take a 5-year car loan, you can also pay it off early. Ask questions about that. Make sure that that's okay with your lender. Sometimes with certain lenders, but not in Iowa, if you pay off early, they'll charge you fees. Know your rights. If you are facing collection calls, know that they can't call outside of 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. They have to stop contacting you if you dispute the debt or ask them to stop contacting you in writing. They can't talk to your employer. They can't talk to your friends or family. And they can't threaten or use abusive language. Credit counseling. In Ames, there is a branch office of a very reputable credit counseling agency. That's not true in all the towns I serve. To find a credit counseling agency that's reputable, nonprofit, subscribes to a particular a positive code of ethics, this website is the place to go. NFCC, National Foundation for Credit Counseling. You'll see ads, late night TV especially, but other times you'll see ads for various kinds of credit counseling services or debt consolidation services, or they might go by different names. Many of them are not working in your favor. They're working to make money for them. So credit counseling isn't free. A first appointment is always going to be free. But if they can help you through a debt management program, they will have to charge you something, maybe $20 or $25 a month. And the reason is because they have costs to cover. So you want to make sure you're dealing with a nonprofit credit counseling agency. But usually, you would never sign up unless the fact that you're paying them that extra money, they have been able to arrange for such a better payment schedule and reduced interest rates with some of your lenders, so that you still come out ahead even though you have to pay them this small monthly fee for that. And then you would not have, they would be paying your bills for you. You'd send them money once a month or once a week, depending on how you get paid, and then they would pay your bills. And so you wouldn't have stamps and some of that other stuff to deal with. I like this story. Suppose we have a young couple. They got married. Life was good. 5 years goes by and they say, wow, look at all the stuff we bought. Look what we've done. I wonder how much we owe on our credit cards, because they never paid attention. You laugh. And they'd look at their different credit cards and they add them up and they say, whoa, In 5 years, we've built up $15,000 of credit card debt. This is a picture of that. This is how much they've earned, no matter how much it is. It's this line. This has been their income, but in order to build $15,000 of credit card debt in 5 years, they've been spending $250 a month more than what they earned. They didn't know it because they've been paying all their bills on time. They've been making their payments. They don't really realize that they've been building up this debt. So at this point, they say, boy, before we have kids, we better fix this. We better get on this. And they start doing some math, or they ask somebody else, how am I going to get out of this debt? The thing is, they're going to have to pay $300 a month for 8 years. I think this was figured at 17%. God, I have to figure that. I have to check my notes on that. But I think this is figured at 17%. So assuming it's a 17% credit card rate, they would have to spend $300 a month to get out of that debt, and it would take them 8 years. What that means is that they take a $550 cut in their lifestyle because they were used to spending this much, and now they're going to have to spend this much. Not only are they losing the $300, but they're also going to have to make an adjustment to not spending this extra money that they've been spending as well. It's painful, and it can build up, it can sneak up on people. So it's important just to be aware of that even a little bit can build up into something that becomes really unmanageable. And the sooner you catch it, the better. The good news is that a little bit on the positive side also makes a difference. And there's the other handout that you have is called PowerPay. There are lots of debt calculators on the internet. This is one that's operated by the Extension Service in Utah State University Extension. Completely nonprofit, non-commercial, and completely secure, by the way. The theory behind PowerPay is very simple. If I start out and my current status is that I have a car payment, a credit card payment, and maybe a payment at a local store, and my total account payments per month are $219, but then I get this one paid off, well, power paying means I don't just pay then $169 a month. Instead, I put that $50 into the highest interest rate and still pay $219 a month. And then when the credit card's paid off, then I put that extra money into the car payment and still pay $219 a month. And in the end, I save a lot of money. And I have a couple examples. This one is $281, car loan, 2 credit cards. As it stands now, if I pay all of those just according to schedule, it's going to take 9 years and 5 months till the last one is paid off, and my total interest cost will be over $4,000. If I power pay and continue to pay $281 a month even after the first debt is paid off, I'll have all 3 debts paid in 4 years and 4 months. That's 5 years. And I will have saved $1,200 in interest. And then there's another nuance that's available in the on the website. You can calculate how much difference it makes. If I pay extra, and maybe it's $25 extra, maybe it's $50 extra, maybe in this case I ran the example with $100 extra. If I pay extra and always put that to the highest interest rate, then that makes even more difference. And here, I'd be paid off in 2 years and 11 months. So that's an extra year and a half that I'll be done, and saving a total of $2,400. So saving an extra $1,200 in interest. Still paying the whole principal, but paying $2,400 less interest. And what's cool with the PowerPay website is you can go figure that out for yourself. And it's useful to people even if you don't have problem debt, even if you just have debt. And here's a mortgage example. This is the same mortgage example we saw before. The total interest was going to be $82,000, but if from day one, every month I pay an extra $25 a month on that mortgage, the total interest will be $10,000 less. $25 a month. $10,000. And I'll be paid off in 2.5 years earlier, besides. If I made it $50 a month, then that's going to save me, $18,000, $17,000. So it can be used on any debt. It's more powerful on higher interest rate debts. So right now, with mortgage rates being low, the extra $25 isn't going to save you quite as much because we've already got a really low interest rate. But this is a 6.5%, which when I did it was not a high interest rate. Okay, this is what the PowerPay website looks like, and if I had time, I could tell you a little more about it. I do want to mention that if you go to the PowerPay website, you do have to create an account. You put an email, and that's a benefit really, because then you can save your information and come back to it later rather than having to re-enter it. I've had an account there for years. They have never sent me an email. They have never, hit me with anything except when I forgot my password. Then they sent me an email because I asked them to. So just so you know, it is not, they will never use it for anything else. Couple of tools you can use to reduce your risk of using credit. All the credit card offers we get in the mail, they're all pre-screened. They're all targeted to people like us. They ask the credit bureaus to give me a list of all the people who meet these criteria. They might be looking for college students with this kind of income and no credit history. Or they might be looking for middle-aged working people with fabulous credit histories. And they'll send a different offer to those different categories. If you go to this website or call this number, you can opt out. You can tell the credit bureaus, don't give my name out. That won't eliminate all the credit offers you get, because you might still get offers from people that already have your name. I belong to an association. I get some offers there. But I get way fewer. So that's a good thing. And then I think you're probably all familiar with the National Do Not Call Registry for telemarketing, but that information is here too. Avoiding bankruptcy. Sometimes people say, well, if I get in over my head, at least I know I can, if I have to, I can get a fresh start through bankruptcy. And that's true. I mean, that's why bankruptcy was created, was because sometimes people need a fresh start. But bankruptcy is not something to count on as a backup plan. It will affect your credit history and your credit score for 10 years. It might definitely mean there'd be certain jobs you would never get just because you have a bankruptcy on your history. And there are a lot of debts that you can't discharge. Student loans being primary among them. So it doesn't solve, some people who have serious debt problems, bankruptcy does not solve the problem. This is just a key, we're down to summary slides here. You want to be able to obtain credit on good terms when you need it. Like the furnace explosion example. You want to know that if you needed credit, you could get it. And so while credit is a cost and a risk, it's also a security blanket that you have it if you need it. And that's an important way to look at it. And you want to value it just like Linus values his blanket, and take really good care of it so that it is not damaged. You want to keep the cost down for yourself, but also keep the risk down. So these are some things you could do as a result of all this. And look, we finished on time. More information is always available at extension.org, which is our national website. And if you have any questions, I can stick around. This is good. Last time the early morning group got kind of ripped off because we didn't get through everything like I should have, because I didn't pace myself. But I got myself in a good pace today. Yes, I hope you all have a good day.